There are those who say that the House of Mogh is all but extinct. To them, I would present the Mogh class. Today, we'll be taking a look at this ship from Star Trek Online. We'll be looking into its development, its design, both behind the scenes and in universe, and try to place it in the 25th century. Ultimately, what really won me over to covering this ship was seeing the Kurak variant, which is a very slow burn, but I guarantee you, by the end of this video, you too will be looking at that Kurak variant in a new light. Okay, so let's get into it. So it was added way back in 2013 during Season 8 of Star Trek Online, which is just like... So this ship is now 10 years old, bear in mind. It's aged incredibly well, as a lot of STO ships have. But they described it in the behind the scenes, they described it as having a sort of a bulldog style build, which I would partially agree with. I think there is a level of sort of rugged stockiness to it, but I think there's also a little bit more going on, which we'll get into. They definitely emphasized the armor in the design, and it's also deliberately meant to contrast with the very elegant Avenger class. The Avenger class, while it is very heavily armored, is very clean, very sleek, very pure looking, whereas the Mogh is very, rugged and hefty and beefy looking. So there's real contrast, and they are kind of meant to match one another roughly. And it was influenced also by the Bortas class, which is one of the battleships. I can see that a little bit, but like I say, I think it's actually got its own lineage going on, which I'll get into. So, in universe, it was designed as a smaller, more compact battlecruiser. I'm not really sure if it's fair to describe it as a battlecruiser given its size. We come in with a size estimate of roughly, we're looking at about 450 meters, which puts it shorter than the Vodcha. But I'm sure if you were to compare it in other dimensions, particularly side-on, you would see that the Mogh is a lot chunkier and heftier. So, in that respect, I think it does stand up to being up to battlecruiser grade. Just barely, I think it scrapes into battlecruiser. And this was a design team that was led by Worfs, hence the name Mogh class. Now, it wasn't a completely original design either. There are some influences from the Vodcha with that split nose design. However, there's an even bigger influence from the 22nd century, the D5. We have here now the D5 next to the Mogh, and of course the Mogh is considerably bigger, but you cannot look at that and honestly say that it was not strongly influenced by the D5, and it makes even more sense when you realise that it was an ancestor of Worf that designed the D5, and the idea was relatively similar. The idea was to create a relatively compact, high-tech, refined weapon system that wasn't quite so reliant on just blunt firepower in the way a lot of other ships of the time were. Now, there's some statements by the wiki, the Star Trek Online wiki, which I must question a little bit. It describes it as having heavier firepower than the Negh'Var. I'm not sure that's quite fair, given the size discrepancy. And I think really comparing it to the Negh'Var is unfair. The Negh'Var is a big Klingon battleship, although by STO standards it's actually relatively modest in size. I think it's much fairer to compare it to the Vodcha. That is the ship which it is kind of closest to and that it is ultimately competing with. Other features is that it includes a dynamic defense deployment system. It's basically a large suicide drone that can utilize 3 different attack modes to best exploit enemy defenses. It's a bit of a novelty weapon, and ultimately the Mogh will be falling back on its more traditional armament, which we will go into. The Mogh specifically is equipped with 2 siege guns. Now, I want to be clear, these are smaller siege guns than on the Negh'Var, and they are not capable of firing aft as the Negh'Vars are. But they are still pretty powerful weapons, and bearing in mind that they're certainly probably in excess, equal to or superior to the heavy disruptor mounted by the Vodcha, and the Mogh has 2 of them, and that's only the start. In the nose, it also has 2 heavy disruptors, much like on the Vochar, in fact very much of the same design, and a torpedo launcher. It also features 4 medium disruptors, 2 on the head, 2 facing aft. It then also has a total of 10 light disruptors in dual batteries, so 5 dual batteries, 1 in the prow, 2 on either side, and 2 facing aft. So in many ways it's actually a bit of a hybrid in terms of its armament. It's very much a hybrid of the Vochar and Negh'Var, again explaining why it then sits in that battlecruiser category despite being quite compact. You'll also notice that it has the Vochar style bridge, the hammerhead style bridge. So there's a lot in common. The devil's in the details here. As well as incorporating a mix of firepower from both Vochar and Negh'Var, the real difference it has, and part of what allows it to punch above its weight, is its armour. Mogh is protected by multiple layers of armour system. We have the base layer ablative armour, which is what you see on the hull. You have outer spaced armour, which are those dark panels. These are spaced armour designed to detonate or disperse incoming projectiles. And you have deployable armour. This is to cover the vulnerable areas, so anything that has windows. During battle, these soft areas of the hull are covered by additional armour, and those help it to cover its more vulnerable areas. This gives it quite a tanky aesthetic. It's quite a hefty ship with quite a robust build, and it shows that there's a lot more emphasis here on survivability and redundancy. With older Klingon ships, if your main weapon went out, well, today is a good day to die. You're going to ram into the nearest enemy ship you can find. But the Klingons post-Dominion War can no longer afford to do that. There's the whole problem of Klingon demographics in the 25th century. That's a whole subject of itself. The Klingons cannot waste lives in the way that they did during the Dominion War, and the Mogh makes sure that they don't. It's a very, very well protected ship. Now, it's not got much in the way of shuttlecraft. It's actually quite hard to tell if it even has a shuttle bay. Certainly it's not got a great provision for shuttles. Now, I would be doing a great deal of a disservice if I was to only talk about the Mogh and not also talk about the Kurak class. You see, the Kurak is... It's not a refit, and these are not modular ships. Unlike the Vochar of the previous generation, which was a genuinely modular design, the Kurak is not modular. You can't just rip out some bits from the Mogh and make a Kurak. What it is fair to say is that they share the same skeleton. They have the same skeleton, but that's a long way off from saying that they are modular. Essentially, at some point in the construction process, you have to decide whether you're building a Mogh or a Kurak, but the Kurak does share a lot of components, and that does simplify construction. So I need to get into the Kurak, because this is the one that I really like, because I really like this variant, and it's a very unique variant. The Kurak, well, the most discernible feature of the Kurak is that prow section, that big open hammerhead style prow. And you might be wondering what it is. Is it a weapon? It's not a weapon. It's a sensor array. That big wide maw is a sensor array. So this is an aggressive reconnaissance battlecruiser. This is a recon battlecruiser. Essentially, it's designed to go places where your other reconnaissance assets can't, because the area's just too hot, it's too dangerous. The Kurak can have good confidence of getting away and also collect the necessary intelligence without having to commit your genuinely heavy assets. So the Kurak is an aggressive reconnaissance ship. It's designed largely for that, and that is reflected in its armament. You have largely the same armament in the main hull, but instead of having 2 underwing siege guns, we have 4 siege guns, and these are smaller, which indicates that they're intended to go after smaller targets at which point it pays to have more fast-firing siege guns. So the Kurak is intending to engage ships a similar size, if not actually smaller, which is unlike the Mogh, which is expecting to have to punch above its weight. It also has less armor. In fact, there's no spaced armor on the Kurak, so they are running light. Although they do still have the ablative armor and deployable armor as well. And it also has huge warp engines. These are big, powerful engines. These are going to drive the Kurak up to some very impressive speeds. Now, they're much less armored and much more vulnerable, so again, it's not intending to take return fire. It is going to get in and get out, but if it does, it's got enough heft to either hit back or indeed to take some hits and still be able to get out of there. And it's very capable when it comes to supporting the skirmishing elements of a fleet. So overall, what we've got here with the Mogh and the Kurak are two genuine battlecruisers. The Klingons are back in the business of battlecruisers after the 24th century, where they were mostly using light cruisers and attack cruisers. They're back in the battlecruiser business, and they are back in it in a big way. The Mogh is a very, very solid battlecruiser. It's capable of punching above its weight. These are both very survivable ships. It's also worth noting that on the Mogh, there are very visible escape pods, which again shows us the changing Klingon mentality. They're less inclined to go down with the ship unless absolutely necessary. And also, again, while I give the Vochar a lot of credit for being modular in its day, and it did a lot by doing that, fundamentally it was a gunship. It was fundamentally a ship with a big cannon. The command variant and any sort of science and recon variants were an afterthought. But with the Kurak, reconnaissance and intelligence gathering and fighting smart, that's at the forefront of their minds when they were designing the Kurak. And it was built from the ground up. It wasn't a lazy, here we'll swap out modules. No, let's build a ship that is properly capable, while still being able to simplify construction and simplify our logistics by building ships off similar skeletons, but also have ships that are still built towards specific specializations and purposes, and thereby have a better spread of capabilities in the Klingon fleet, so that we can minimize casualties. In war, there is nothing more honorable than victory. And that's very important because some Klingons think that there's nothing more honorable than death. And the lesson learned in the Dominion War is that death on its own is not honorable. Victory is honorable, and as weapons of war, the Mogh and the Kurak are very capable, and they will bring about victory. Sometimes it won't be glamorous. It won't be the Vochars charging in on the flank of the Dominion fleet and, blazing away, going in charge of the Light Brigade style. It won't be like that, but it will be methodical and will be effective. And in that way, again, signifies almost a return to that 23rd century style of Klingon combat, that more methodical, professional approach to warfare and tactics. So I think the Mogh class and the Kurak as well are a very effective and lasting legacy that Worf can be proud of. He's left the Empire with quite the ship to be getting on with. It probably just needs to avoid barrels. So I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, let me know in the comments. If you have other thoughts regarding the Mogh class, again, let me know in the comments. And I will see you all in the next video.